It's Mo. It is August 8th, and no, it's not August 8th. It's September 8th. It is September 8th, and I've started reading my July TBR Spin pick. So TBR Spin is a super fun booktube game to read down your TBR. It was created by Sarah at Freshly Read Books and Jill at The Book Bully. The premise is very simple. You pick 12 books at the start of the year, and the two hosts spin a wheel every month that has prompts on it that help us pick a book off of our stack. So in the beginning of the year, you have 12 books, and then Jill or Sarah spin the wheel, and the prompt leads you to read a book off that list. In February, you have 11 books, and they spin the wheel and you read a book, etc., etc. So you can start right now, and you could pick 12 books and go back to the beginning of the year. You could start like I am, pick 6 books and check out the July prompt and read your July book. You could do 5 books and read August, 4 books and read September, or you could wait till next month. At the end of this video, I will be watching the prompt for August and picking my next book. I vlog all my TBR Spin books, and I do that with every vlog. At the end of each vlog, I watch the next prompt and I pick the next book. So if you want to see the books that I've read before, there's a playlist listed down below, as well as the information for the game and links to Jill and Sarah's channels. For the July prompt, I picked The Office of Historical Corrections by Daniel Evans. This is a novella and short stories. So another TBR Spin, another book of short stories. I specifically picked a lot of short story collections for this TBR Spin stack this year because I have a lot of collections that I wanted to get through. I got The Office of Historical Corrections in 2023 at a rummage sale, and I have been wanting to read it since I heard about it. This is one of the early ones that I heard about on BookTube, one of the BookTube books that people were really into that I wanted to read. So I'm glad that I finally got it, and I'm glad that I started reading it. I am a little under halfway through, and that means that I've read 4 short stories so far, I think. Let me see. I've read 4 short stories, and then there's 2 more short stories, and then The Office of Historical Corrections is the novella, and that one is like 100 pages long, so it is much longer than the other short stories. The first story is Happily Ever After, and this story is about a young woman who works at a museum for the Titanic, which is a museum somewhere in the world, somewhere in America, that is a replica of the Titanic and has information about the Titanic. I don't know where this story is set, but funnily enough, I will be visiting Tennessee later this year, and they have a museum of the Titanic that is a scale model replica of the Titanic. It's smaller. I don't know if it's scale model, actually. It's smaller than the Titanic, but it's like a big giant ship in the middle of Tennessee that you can go see. I think Tennessee particularly likes things like this because they also have the Parthenon in Nashville, which is a replica of the Parthenon in Greece. So I'm super excited to go see that, and I'm super excited that the first story had that in it, and I think it's the same one, I would assume. How many model ship museums of the Titanic could there possibly be? I love when books are connected to your life like that, or that you weren't expecting. That happened to me with the last TBR Spin book that I read. I was talking about a specific story that you would know well from childhood with my husband, and then I started reading that book and it had references to that story. So just very cool. This story is about this young woman working at this Titanic museum and just kind of like coasting through life, not really liking anything, not really being ambitious about anything, and more or less her life and how it changes slightly when someone comes to make a music video at the Titanic Museum. I enjoyed that story. I thought it was interesting. The next story I think was my favorite one that I've read so far. It is Richard of York, A Battle in Vain, and it is about a young black woman going to the wedding of a person that she met when they were detained in isolation after a potential outbreak happened on a plane that they were on. So this young woman had met this young man, and she was invited to his wedding years later. And so we hear about their relationship and how that came about. We hear about her, and again, she's kind of another depressed woman moving, just like a little bit blasé about her life. She's a photojournalist, which she does enjoy, but people don't understand and don't take seriously. And then what happens at this wedding when she gets there, and she's like basically the only black woman there. She's not in the bridal party, but she goes to like the hen do and her relationship with the bride, things like that. The next story was also really interesting. It is Boys Go to Jupiter, and this was a longer story. It is about a young woman who goes to Florida to visit her dad. Again, kind of blasé about her life. She ends up sleeping with a not really nice person. It's not that he's not nice, but he definitely has racist tendencies, and she kind of does it in a blasé way to like spite her mother to spite her stepmother. But a picture that he takes of her gets to the internet and has repercussions when she goes back to her sleepy Vermont college. That one was just really interesting, kind of an interesting perspective, and a little bit heavy for sure. And the last story that I read so far from this collection is called Alcatraz, and this is about a young woman who moves to San Francisco, Oakland area from the East Coast, and her relationship with her mother, and her mother's relationship with her grandfather, who was the person who raised her, and how our main character's mother strove her whole life to rectify a injustice that her grandfather, the person who raised her, suffered, and how that affected our main character's relationship with her mother, and how that affected our main character's life, and what happens when our main character brings her mother to San Francisco for a form of closure. So I like that one too. I think all these stories are like well contained, interesting, full. Like that's something that I've been running into with short stories a lot. Like the idea that the story is not just a partial idea, that the story itself is very self-contained. There might be aspects of the story that you want to know more of. There might be aspects of the story that can be expanded on. There might be aspects of the story that leave you in a cliffhanger. But it doesn't feel like a half-formed thing. It doesn't feel like rushed. It doesn't feel unworked on. A short story collection that I read earlier this year, 19 Claws and a Blackbird, almost every story felt like that, and it was really unsatisfying to read. These definitely felt like they could have all been longer novellas. They could have all been expanded on. They could have been parts of longer novels, maybe, if you wanted to learn more about these characters. But none of them seemed like they had to be that. They all seemed like they were pretty full stories as it was. Obviously, they all follow a lot of the same themes. The idea of womanhood and adulthood of women. The idea of like sex and love and relationships, familial relationships, romantic relationships. I'm a little disappointed that this one isn't queer. Maybe that's every book. I wish every book were queer. But the last short story collection that I read, Her Body and Other Parties, which was my last TBR Spin book, was very queer, but very casually queer in that like that's just the life that was lived by those characters. And this one just, you know, when it's all straight, you're kind of like, whatever. So I'm excited to read the last two short stories and then get into the longer novella of this one. And I will probably get back to you when I have read all of those. Let me know if you've read The Office of Historical Corrections. Let me know what you thought of it. And when I finish this up, I will come back to you and let you know my final thoughts. And we will pick the August book for TBR Spin. have finished The Office of Historical Corrections by Daniel Evans. So I really like this one. I think a couple of things did impede my reading of this one a little bit, though. And one is that I thought or hoped it would be queer, and it is not queer. Here's chips. So I was kind of waiting for stories to be queer. And then the other one, I think it's just based on the name that I thought that some of these stories were going to be speculative, because to me, The Office of Historical Corrections sounds like a sci-fi, like a speculative story. That is the titular novella, and none of these stories are speculative. None of these stories are sci-fi. They're all just regular, normal stories. This book did remind me a little bit of Lot, and what was the other short story collection that I read this year? If I Survive You. A couple of different short stories or novellas told in short stories reminded me of this one, because it's just about women, and specifically Black women living their lives, and they're in all different states, they're in all different places, they're just trying to kind of survive and think about their histories, think about their traumas, think about their happiness and things, and you know, just pretty normal stories. What I will say about this one that I really liked was that all the stories felt very cohesive, they felt very finished, they felt very polished and worked on in a lot of ways. I did tab quite a bit at the bottom of this one, things that I wanted to return to or revisit. I also have been tabbing every time any book mentions New Jersey, especially if they're not obviously if they're not set in New Jersey, or if they're not taking place really close to New Jersey, like in New York. Some of these stories did take place in New York. Some of them took place in DC, some of them took place in the South, some of them took place in Texas. So I think I talked to you about the first 4 stories. And then the next, which was not that memorable apparently, because I don't remember what it was about. Oh, this one was interesting. Why Women Just Won't Say What They Want was about an artist who is a misogynist and who has done women wrong, and then suddenly he disappears and he's gone for a few years, and then when he comes back with apologies to all the women in his life. So all the different women that he's wronged or done right by or anything, his daughter, his wives, his girlfriends, the people that he's harassed, the people that he's sexually assaulted, the people that he's dated, everyone gets an apology, and a lot of them are confused by this, and most of them assume that it's just his next art exhibit. So that one was interesting, but obviously not super, super memorable. The next story was Anything Could Disappear, and this one I really liked. This is the one that I think I've thought about the most since reading it, and it was about a young woman who is traveling to New York. She is doing a favor for a friend by bringing something to New York, and while she's on the Greyhound bus to New York, a child is left on the bus. So I thought that one was a really interesting one. Whoa, chippy, all right. And then we have the final story, which is actually a novella, which is The Office of Historical Corrections. I did like this one a lot too. It is about a young woman who works at, what is it actually called? She works at the Institute for Public History, which is a governmental job where the people who work with her go around and they correct historical inaccuracies on plaques or statues, or even when people are talking, if they say something that's wrong. There's a whole part of the department that work online, and our main character used to be a history teacher and she decided to work for this, but it is often playfully called the Office of Historical Corrections instead of the Institute for Public History, the Institute for Public History. It's kind of about the job and about how her job works and about what got her to that job. It's about her relationship with her boyfriend, and it's specifically a relationship with someone else who she works with. So a woman that she works with, she actually knew in childhood, and a lot of this story is about their relationship and how their relationship changed and grew over the years and how they're very different people. And then the story kind of culminates when they have to kind of do a job for the Office of Historical Corrections and are forced to confront each other. So that one was really interesting. I did really like it. It definitely felt like a novella, like a complete small story. I say complete, but I want to be clear that like a lot of these short stories end ambiguously or end abruptly. But when I say complete, I more mean that they were well thought out, well planned, well executed, as opposed to feeling like a fragment of something or feeling like a unedited or unrevised work of fiction. So this one definitely didn't feel like that. I'm glad to have finally read this. It's not what I expected. I will definitely be keeping this one because I could see myself revisiting these stories again, especially when I don't already have like kind of a preconception in mind of what I thought they were going to be or what they should be or what they are. Would love to read more by Daniel Evans. I think that their short form work, from what I've read here, both shorter stories and their novella, is really strong. So I would love to read more novellas from this author. I would love to read a novel from this author. Now it is time to pick the next TBR spin. So we're up to August. It's September now. It is September 15th. So we're not that far behind. I know I always get excited when we're at this point. Like we're at the point that if I read the August book in September, I could theoretically pick out the September book and then I could pick out the October book in October still. You know what I mean? Like we're close enough that I could potentially catch up, and it would be nice to catch up because we are nearing the end of the year and nearing the end of this year's TBR spin. I certainly hope that Jill and Sarah will be doing the spin again. So let's go over the TBR spin books that I still have on my stack. Split Tooth by Tanya Tagaq. How to Love a Jamaican by Alexia Arthurs. The Spirit of Science Fiction by Robert Bolaño. The Dead Take the A Train by Cassandra Kaw and Richard Kadri. And The Stationery Shop by Marhan Kamali. So mostly novels now. We've knocked out all the short stories except one collection. But I don't have a preference really. It is Sci-Fi September, so this one has science fiction in the title. This one is horror, so that's kind of like science fiction. So those are two potentials that I might be like more interested in reading. I'm a little burnt out on short story collections, so I might skip this one depending on what the prompt is. It's Jill's spin at the wheel, so let's go ahead and watch Jill's video and see what prompt we get. Okay, so Jill, similar to Sarah, just went over the books that she has read since the spin, and she did spin the wheel, and it says, a book you would assign to a class if you were a teacher. So I think that's an interesting one. Not super helpful to pick a book, but I think you could go with any of these three. Robert Bolaño is a very well-renowned author, so you could certainly do this. So this could be a pick. Probably The Stationery Shop is like the most praised book out of this stack, the most probably awarded book out of this stack. And then I think probably a Indigenous author would be a really good one. I mean, this one is so, its sprayed edges, gorgeous, and then it's like vignette-y, and it has like pictures. I was hesitant to get the audiobook for this one because of the vignettes, because of the pictures, but I recently saw Meg from Meg with Books read this one, and she said that this author is also a throat singer, and there is throat singing in the audiobook, so that one might be really good, and maybe this is the one that I would suggest or assign a class. I'm gonna watch the rest of the video. I'm leaning towards this one or possibly Robert Bolaño, but I don't know, I'm leaning towards this one. Let's watch the rest of the video. Just make sure there's no other weird things that come up. Okay. No surprises there, nothing extra. I think I definitely am going to go with Split Tooth by Tanya Tagaq, and I will see if I can find the audio for this one as well and maybe read it both physically and audibly and see. The person who had this before me did dog ear page. I don't know if that's as far as they got or if they were dog earing this specific particular page for some reason. Who knows? Let me know if you read Split Tooth. Let me know if you've read The Office of Historical Corrections. Let me know if you are participating in the TBR spin, what your spin book was for August. This is the August book, or what your spin book is for September, because we are currently in September. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!